In 2018, I was notified that a wireless telecommunications facility was going to be placed less than 100 feet from my home. Prior to this, I wasn't too concerned about wireless radiation emissions, but the potential of having a wireless facility so close to my home made me wonder about the potential health effects this antenna might have on my family, and I decided to learn more. I was suddenly thrust into the complex world of microwave radiating infrastructure and 5G. Needless to say, there's a lot to understand. This presentation will help relay the underlying issues surrounding telecom's push to continue expanding wireless infrastructure. What you will learn is that this technology impacts privacy and national security, and that there is a growing body of science showing the harm from this infrastructure and growing opposition as people become aware of the threat these frequencies have on the health of our children, our families, and the planet. Knowledge is power, and once you've learned a few facts, you will begin to see how an unsuspecting public went about their lives as microwave radiating infrastructure exploded across the country, causing pervasive amounts of electrosmog throughout our communities. You will also begin to understand that the powerful telecom industry has every advantage, and this is truly an uphill battle. We need everyone to stand up and participate in turning this around. As the industry moves to 5G, it becomes more imperative to educate others who will help us to stand in opposition, as we are the only things standing in the way of the telecom industry. I invite you to learn something today to help decide where you stand. Chapter 1, Wireless Technology 101. In order to understand exactly why these frequencies are harmful, let's start by explaining some basics. We will begin by explaining what an EMF or an electromagnetic field is and how it is measured. An EMF is what's created when an electric charge moves through space, which creates an electric field and a magnetic field. It can be described as a wave containing electromagnetic energy. This energy propagated by waves is called electromagnetic radiation, which travels at the speed of light. As a wave, an EMF is measured in hertz. Hertz refers to the number of completed cycles per second. 1 hertz equals 1 cycle. 1 megahertz equals 1 million hertz. 1 gigahertz equals 1 billion hertz. Wireless modems use 2.4 gigahertz or 2.4 billion hertz. This range of possible frequencies makes up the electromagnetic spectrum, which is divided into different bands. Bands at lower energy have lower frequencies or lower hertz, and bands with higher energy have higher frequencies or higher hertz. The electromagnetic waves that are in each frequency band are called by different names: radio waves, microwaves, infrared light, visible light, ultraviolet light, X-rays, and gamma rays. Here is a diagram of the electromagnetic spectrum, which shows energy in the form of waves. Energy traveling as electromagnetic waves is called radiation. The left side of the diagram represents lower energy radiation, which corresponds to lower frequencies. Moving to higher energy and higher frequency radiation as we move to the right of the diagram. You can see that this electromagnetic spectrum is divided into two categories: non-ionizing radiation and ionizing radiation. This is shown along the bottom of the diagram. On the left is non-ionizing lower energy, and on the right is ionizing higher energy. Looking across the middle of the diagram, you can see that ionizing radiation starts with energy levels higher than visible light, including X-rays and gamma rays. You can see that non-ionizing radiation includes radio waves represented by the yellow box in the middle of the diagram. Radio waves are the type of energy or radiation used in our cell phones and all wireless technology, and includes microwaves, which are also used in microwave ovens. In high school physics, we are taught that ionizing radiation has enough energy to free electrons from the atoms or molecules they are attached to, therefore ionizing them, and being able to cause more damage like DNA changes. We are also taught that non-ionizing radiation does not dislodge electrons and therefore has been believed to be safe as long as power levels are not high enough to heat tissue. This was the prevailing scientific opinion in 1996 when the federal standard for a safe level of exposure to radio waves was set by the FCC. In the 2 decades since then, many scientific studies have shown non-thermal biological effects from non-ionizing radiation, specifically from radio waves, the form of non-ionizing radiation used in wireless technology, even at power levels where it does not heat tissue. These biological effects include oxidation, which is known to produce free radicals in the body, which can cause cellular damage and DNA damage, having widespread effects detrimental to human health. All wireless devices emit radiation, typically called radio frequency radiation, and create what is known as electrosmog. Smart meters are the building blocks for the so-called smart grid that governs the distribution of electricity to our homes and businesses. These meters transmit information to our local providers via wireless communications. Privacy, security, health, accuracy, and consumer fraud risks have been identified with smart meters, and depending on the regulatory protections and enforcement of those rules in your state, your utility will be able to sell this information to a series of corporations and the government. Smart meters are only the beginning of many things that will connect to the smart grid. The G in 1G to 5G is an industry term meaning generation. The generations of wireless technology began in the 1980s using analog signals to bring voice ability, with each new generation bringing new abilities. 5G will bring faster downloads and will be connected to a smart grid, giving the ability to capture information never before realized and the ability to connect to the IoT or the Internet of Things. One important note, 1G to 4G's primary purpose is to communicate person to person. 5G's primary purpose is to communicate with things. Smart meters and 5G are all a part of the smart grid. 5G small cells are different than other generations because they will utilize a different part of the spectrum, which include frequencies called millimeter waves. Millimeter waves have difficulty penetrating solid objects, such as the walls of buildings. In order to overcome this, they will be placed closer to the user with a higher density of cell structures. Current cellular networks allow cell towers to be placed far from the user, from about 2/3 of a mile to 2 miles. 5G networks will have as many as one small cell transmitter approximately 500 to 750 feet apart. 5G will also work with the broader 3G and 4G infrastructure. Chapter 2. Who makes sure we're safe? Policies regarding wireless radiation are regulated by the Federal Communications Commission, or the FCC. The FCC chair is a revolving door of former telecom executives, which is why many view it as a captive agency, meaning that it prioritizes the interests of the telecommunications industry over the best interests of citizens. Currently, Ajit Pai is the chairman of the FCC and was previously an attorney for Verizon. The Telecommunications Act of 1996 was the first significant overhaul of telecommunications law, amending the Communications Act of 1934. This overhaul broadened the regulatory power of the FCC to include the impact wireless radiation has on human health. The 1996 TCA gave the FCC the ability to preempt local government's ability to regulate the placement of wireless facilities based on environment, later argued to include health. Per Section 704 of the 1996 Telecommunications Act, no state or local government or instrumentality thereof may regulate the placement, construction, and modification of personal wireless service facilities on the basis of the environmental effects of radio frequency emissions to the extent that such facilities comply with the Commission's regulations concerning such emissions. Along with the 1996 Telecom Act, local government limitations now include further restrictions enacted in late 2018. U.S. Senate Bill S1699, the Streamlined Small Cell Deployment Act, Third Report and Order Declaratory Ruling include shot clocks, which reduce permit approval times, deemed approved clause, which give automatic approval of permits if not completed within the shot clock time frame, caps on amounts local governments can charge for permits, and bans on moratoriums. In order to protect citizens from adverse health impacts from wireless radiation, the FCC has defined the maximum levels to which humans should be exposed. These limits are based on data from at least 25 years ago. The United States has set this at 1,000 microwatts per centimeter square, which simply stated is the maximum level of radiation exposure before it is hazardous to your health. You can see that most countries have far lower levels than the US. For instance, you can see that India and Israel has set their safety limits at 100 microwatts per centimeter square. China and Russia have set their safety limit at 10 microwatts per centimeter square. But on the far left of this chart, you can see that Salzburg, Austria, shows their safety limit at 0.001 microwatts per centimeter square. Chapter 3. What is the upside and downside of 5G and wireless infrastructure? 5G is said to be the next gold rush, driving many new devices and infrastructure, bringing in the era of the IoT, or the Internet of Things. It will help us to connect our homes through smart appliances and smart energy. It will be integrated into healthcare and factory automation, and it will bring us driverless cars and artificial intelligence. It will also bring about faster video transfer speeds. But it will also bring about a significant amount of added electrosmog on top of the existing electrosmog. Ole Johansson was featured in the documentary Generation Zapped, where he relayed that existing levels of microwave radiation in our atmosphere are extremely high. He states that this level has increased so much that there's a quintillion times more radiation in the atmosphere compared to just 10 years ago. That's a 1 with 18 zeros. According to the CTIA, which is the lobbyist group for the cellular industry, the current wireless infrastructure began in 1983 with the first 1G antennas. The CTIA website states that there are over 150,000 cellular towers in the United States. Other estimates place it at around 325,000. The CTIA also states on their website that 5G will require 800,000 more wireless facilities in the US, with estimates of over 1 million total infrastructure. This will add significantly to the cumulative radiation on our planet. As if placing 5G antennas everywhere isn't enough, satellites have already been launched to create 5G in low orbit. SpaceX, OneWeb, Boeing, Spire Global, and Project Kuiper are just a few companies who are launching these satellites. These satellites will beam down 5G frequencies from space, blanketing the Earth with microwave radiation. And already there are reports of problems. Astronomers have relayed that 5G satellites are blocking views. The NOAA states that 5G global networks threaten weather forecasting. NASA relays that 5G networks threaten their communications systems. And the Department of Defense and the Department of Transportation state that 5G will interfere with their GPS navigational systems. There are also privacy issues that coincide with wireless technology. Personal information collection, analysis, and dissemination is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Communications from smart devices provide a very detailed consumer profile. The consumer profile can tell interested parties what specific devices they own, when they use them, when they are home, when they go to sleep, when they wake up, and so much more. This information is as good as gold for those seeking to influence the behavior of citizens. Information collection and analysis is being enabled by our government and also enforced by government entities charged with the oversight of utility monopolies. Why is this concerning? Because it goes against our foundational federal and state constitutions, which are supposed to protect our privacy and protect us from unreasonable search and seizures. Both the California Constitution, as well as other state constitutions, and the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution provide us with this protection. It's worth noting that wireless technology and infrastructure is much more susceptible to cyber attacks than hardwired systems, and former CIA Director James Woolsey knows it. In 2011, he stated, "A so-called smart grid that is as vulnerable as what we've got is not smart at all. It's a really, really stupid grid." In 2010, The Atlantic featured an article entitled, "What's Really Wrong with the Smart Grid?" The article points out that if utilities or others sell information about our habits to third parties like health insurers, who, for example, decide that we spend too much time in front of the TV drinking beer to be worth insuring, it will become a whole new problem. Chapter 4, Manufactured Doubt, also known as tobacco strategies. What is manufactured doubt? Manufactured doubt is a term used to describe actions taken by organizations to obscure the harmful effects of their products or actions by manipulating scientific evidence. An internal 1969 document from a tobacco company relayed that doubt is our product, since it is the best means of competing with the body of fact that exists in the mind of the general public. It is also the means of establishing a controversy. This manufactured doubt has allowed our government to lag in regulating industries, exposing citizens to toxic substances for decades. In the 1950s, epidemiology studies, animal experiments, cellular pathology, and chemical analytics proved lung cancer, once rare, was now epidemic because of cigarette smoking. Yet advertisements like these made people feel that cigarettes were harmless. Other industries also ignored the science, to include DDT, asbestos, glyphosate, and many more. Manufactured doubt is being used by most corporate industries. In an April 2018 issue of The Nation, Mark Hertsgaard and Mark Dowie wrote an investigative report entitled "How Big Wireless Made Us Think That Cell Phones Are Safe, a Special Investigation." The disinformation campaign and massive radiation increase behind the 5G rollout. Manipulating science, government, and media, Telecom has hidden the dark truth about the impact wireless has on our health. Norm Alster, an investigative journalist who has written for the New York Times, Forbes, Businessweek, and Investors Business Daily, wrote an expose entitled "Captured Agency: How the FCC is Dominated by the Industries It Presumably Regulates." In this investigative report, he relays that Motorola hired Jerry Phillips, a scientist at the Veterans Administration Medical Center in Loma Linda, California, to head research to find if cell phone radiation had any negative health effects. Phillips's research found negative biological impacts on health. In 1998, Phillips published his findings despite warnings from his boss not to. Afterward, Phillips's funding stopped. Another tactic used by the industry is called astroturfing. Astroturfing is the attempt to create an impression of widespread grassroots support for a policy, individual, or product where little support exists. Astroturfers often disguise themselves and publish blogs, write letters to the editor, produce ads, start nonprofits, establish Facebook and Twitter accounts, edit Wikipedia pages, or simply post comments online to try to fool you into thinking an independent or grassroots movement is speaking. Using their partners in the news media, they attempt to lend an air of legitimacy or impartiality to their efforts. Social media platforms are a haven for paid media trolls posing as regular people, attacking and controversializing people and organizations exposing wrongdoing, rather than directly addressing the wrongdoing itself, are hallmarks of astroturfed media stories. Chapter 5. What proof is there that wireless radiation is harmful to our health? Studies completed in the 1970s were initiated after World War II personnel experienced health problems while exposed to microwave radiation while using radar equipment. Their symptoms included severe headaches, sleep deprivation, depression, lack of focus, lack of impulse control, slowed reaction time, tremors, vertigo, and more. Here are a couple of these early studies. They include more than 2,200 studies linking weak radio frequency radiation to more than 122 biological effects. There's the 1972 U.S. Naval Medical Research Institute study and the 1974 U.S. Army study. There's also a compendium of thousands of other U.S. government military research studies regarding health impacts of microwave radiation. In the 1960s, Alan Frey, a Cornell University scientist, showed that weak radio frequency signals, just like those from today's cell phones and other wireless technology in homes, opened up the normally closed blood-brain barrier. Within a few minutes of exposure from these frequencies, the blood-brain barrier is breached. In the 1990s, firefighters experienced symptoms after 2G and 3G cell towers were installed on or near firehouses. Their symptoms included severe headaches, sleep deprivation, depression, lack of focus, lack of impulse control, slowed reaction time, tremors, vertigo, and more. Their union fought to protect the firefighters, and as a result, they were given special provisions under AB 57, giving them exemption to the placement of wireless infrastructure on or adjacent to their facilities. In 1997, Dr. Henry Lai reported DNA single and double strand breaks at levels far below the current FCC exposure standard, proving non-ionizing radiation damages DNA. In the decades before this, it was thought that only ionizing radiation could break DNA strands. In this brain image, you can see the comparative radiation penetration from cell phone usage in a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old, and an adult. Notice that the children's brains absorb more radiation than an adult's after the same amount of exposure. This is attributed to higher water content and thinner skulls in children. In 2011, a team led by Dr. Nora Volkow showed that areas of the brain closest to the radiating antenna of a cell phone responded with significantly increased glucose metabolism. In conclusion, this study provides evidence that in humans, radio frequency electromagnetic field exposure from cell phone use affects brain function, as shown by the regional increases in metabolic activity. In an attempt to prove conclusively once and for all whether or not wireless radiation is harmful, the FDA sponsored an extremely thorough $30 million study in 1999. The study was conducted by the National Toxicology Program. The study results were first reported in 2016 and peer-reviewed in 2018 and showed the following: clear evidence of tumors in the hearts of male rats, some evidence of tumors in the brains of male rats, some evidence of tumors in the adrenal glands of male rats. In the U.S., clear evidence is the highest level of certainty. Many studies have been completed on the bioeffects of electromagnetic frequencies, to include another large-scale study from the renowned Ramazzini Cancer Research Institute in Italy. When completed, it also found the same unusual cancers as the NTP study. When people think about radiation, they think about cancer. In reality, the more prevalent symptoms connected to non-ionizing radiation are the same symptoms that the servicemen and firefighters experienced, to include headaches, sleep deprivation, depression, lack of focus, lack of impulse control, slowed reaction time, tremors, vertigo, and more. It's also important to note that the U.S. classifies electromagnetic sensitivities, or EMS, as a disability under the ADA. These radio frequencies penetrate wildlife too. There are numerous studies showing harm to both plants and animals, including bee colony collapse, navigational pattern changes in birds, as well as tree and plant death when in close proximity to mobile phone base stations. Verizon and other telecom companies understand that their products have safety issues. During stakeholder meetings, the telecom companies must disclose to their stakeholders the possibility of litigation surrounding RF harm from their products, to include cell phones and other wireless devices and equipment. Insurance companies are in the business of assessing risk and have defined EMFs as a pollutant. Swiss Re, the second largest reinsurer in the world, has placed devices that emit EMFs, including 5G, in the highest risk category. In their 2019 annual report, they cited increased health effects from EMFs, hackers' ability to exploit wireless 5G to steal data, privacy and security breaches, as well as espionage as reasons for this classification. Insurance companies like Swiss Re and Lloyd's of London, as well as other insurance companies, have put EMF exclusion statements in their standard liability policies. Chapter 7. Is there any resistance? Many organizations around the world are making precautionary statements or demanding moratoriums, including doctors, scientists, and public health organizations. The American Academy of Pediatrics has sent letters to the FCC in 2012 and 2013 asking for a reevaluation of federal safety limits due to the concern for children being exposed to increasing amounts of wireless radiation, and the California Department of Public Health has created guidelines for safe cell phone use. As of April 30th, 2020, the EMF Scientist Appeal shows over 253 EMF scientists from 43 nations asking the UN to reassess biological impacts of 4G and 5G. As of June of 2020, there are almost 300,000 signatures for the Stop 5G on Earth and Space, which has been signed by international scientists and doctors calling for the EU to halt the rollout of 5G. There is also congressional and legal pushback. U.S. Senate Bill S-2012 and U.S. House Bill H.R. 530. Both are seeking to overturn the 2018 Streamline Rules and Orders. As well, the Ninth Circuit Court is hearing a case brought about by cities and counties across the country asking to reverse these rules and orders. Representative Anna Eshoo stated that the FCC had failed to listen to reasonable input from communities across the country, cowered to industry interests, and failed to put the public interests first. Chapter 8. What is being done locally and what can I do? Because of the 1996 Telecom Act and the 2018 streamlining rules, many cities across the country are stating that their hands are tied. But local governments have more ability to regulate than they believe, but are often told by their own attorneys that their hands are tied. Nonetheless, independent telecom attorneys and analysts agree that cities' hands are not tied. They know how the industry has created an environment of fear, conveying veiled threats of lawsuits if communities try to enact protective ordinances. Many of these attorneys and analysts have worked inside the telecom industry, so they know firsthand how fear is used by telecom. By standing up to telecom, many local governments have found legal ways to add language that protect the interest of local government and citizens and still stay in compliance with all federal and state laws and FCC rules and orders. Based on the advice of these independent attorneys, here is a list of just a few key provisions that local wireless ordinances should include. And many cities have boldly stood up and found ways to create protective ordinances for their cities and citizens, showing that cities' hands are not tied. Here is a list of just a few of the California cities that have managed to put together protective language in their ordinances. There are many things that citizens can do too, and most of these take very little time, but there is no doubt that all of us need to take action. Citizens are the only thing that will stop this, and as Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Please do your own research. The websites I've included here are ones that I found to be credible sites with peer-reviewed research from non-industry independent scientists.